Can Matt Whitaker, the new acting attorney general, end the Mueller investigation?
Well, I'll tell you, it comes as a little bit of a surprise. Not that Jeff Sessions has been replaced. That tension has been there from almost the beginning, with Attorney General Sessions, who I think is a very honorable man, recusing himself from the Russia investigation. But now here he is, the chief of staff is now the acting attorney general. So let's wait and see. I know a lot of conclusions are being drawn in light of what the comments that Mr. Whitaker has made, his writings and so forth, his being critical of the Bob Mueller investigation. But there's so many traditions of the Justice Department, and Mr. Whitaker is now a part of that. He's served as chief of staff of the department. He's been at the elbow of Jeff Sessions. So what's he going to do? Obviously, we don't know, but what we do know is he's not just going to be acting unilaterally. If he does, it could be quite dangerous for him.
Tell me more about that, because what makes you think he won't act unilaterally? I mean, I'm not sure we need to wait and see what happens, Mr. Starr, as you're suggesting, since we do know how he feels. He feels that the Mueller probe is possibly too far-reaching. He also feels that one way to starve it is to just sort of starve it of its funding. Here he was speaking about this. Listen to Matt Whitaker.
I could see a scenario where Jeff Sessions is replaced with a recess appointment, and that Attorney General doesn't fire Bob Mueller, but he just reduces his budget so low that his investigation grinds to almost a halt.
Mr. Starr, that sounds like a preview.
It is. It's a warning shot to say, okay, this is going to be watched. But the nation is not just going to stand by and allow unilateral power to be exercised.
What can the nation do?
Oh, it's called the Congress of the United States. It's called the press. It's called the political pressure that the Justice Department will, in fact, experience if there is a non-merits-based action by the acting attorney general, if it is done simply out of loyalty. But we have no reason to think that that will happen. We are on warning that something could happen, but let's not jump. The jury is out. Let's not jump to conclusions, because I keep talking about the traditions of the department, including the advice that he is going to be receiving, probably has already received some as of last evening, about what is appropriate for him. He's now the acting attorney general of the United States. He's not chief of staff. He's no longer a staff guy. He's exercising power as opposed to just giving advice and pontificating.
Yes,
that changes.
Yes, you can. Jeffrey Toobin is here right next to me. He has a burning question for you right now.
Just step back for a second. I mean, you know the Department of Justice. You know the kind of people who are named Attorney General of the United States, senators, judges. What about naming someone, frankly, this obscure and this unqualified just because he's been critical of the Mueller investigation? I mean, what do you think about that choice?
Hey, Jeff, that's a little bit unfair. Yes, Rod Rosenstein is the natural. There's no question to become the Attorney General. I'll concede that. But what we do know about Mr. Whitaker is that he served with great distinction as a United States Attorney, and he's been Chief of Staff now for quite some time. So he has seen the Department of Justice close up and personal. Jeff, as you know, I served as Chief of Staff to the Attorney General. So, no, he's not unqualified. Is he the most qualified? Oh, we can debate that. But he's not been taken off the street. But our place, here's the key. He's not been moved from the White House counsel's office over to put the Justice Department in receivership. He's a person of the department.
Yeah, but one question, Mr. Starr, and that is, we do know how Whitaker feels about this, because he's already said that he thought that if Mueller investigated Donald Trump's finances, that would be a red line, and that he thinks that Mueller has come dangerously close to a red line. He thinks that the parameters should be much more narrow for Mueller. Doesn't that tell us what he's going to do?
No, it doesn't. That's my point. He's now the Attorney General. He's taken an oath of office. And so he's put in a very different role, and now he's going to be hearing people with information and perspectives that he's going to have to evaluate, he's going to have to assess. Remember, he got a very high note of endorsement from Charles Grassley. Senator Grassley is a person of total rectitude and integrity. And remember, Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, wants to protect the Mueller investigation. So let's just wait and see. The jury's out.
But do you think that Robert Mueller can investigate Donald Trump's finances?
He can if he's authorized, but under the regulations, yes, he can if he's authorized to do so.
And therein lies the rub. Is he authorized by what Rod Rosenstein, the letter that Rod Rosenstein sent to Robert Mueller in terms of the parameters? And here they are. You can investigate, it sounds like. The special counsel is authorized to conduct the investigation. Number one, any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump. We knew that. Any matters that arose or may arise directly from that investigation. Therein lies the rub. And then any matters within the scope of the general powers of the special counsel. So it's that middle one that is open to interpretation. Does that include his finances?
It is. And if, there's no question, arising directly, right? And so what got this started? What got it started, of course, was the Bob Mueller testimony about Russian interference with our politics. And there's no question that the Russians have interfered. See the great indictments. I think they're very powerful documents of indictments that Bob Mueller and his team have returned. Now, Trump finances seem to me far afield from what the Russians were doing. But we don't know. We're behind the veil of ignorance in that respect. We also don't know what Bob Mueller, we have these intimations, what Bob Mueller knows. So what will happen is Bob Mueller and his team will now be briefing the Attorney General, and they will say, here's what we have been doing, here's why we have been doing it, and then the Attorney General, under the regulations, does have the power to say, no, I don't want you to take that step. But that hasn't happened yet. But once something like that happens, there will be guardrails in effect and checks and balances. It's not unilateral power.
But how? What are the guardrails? If Special Counsel Mueller briefs Whitaker, where are the guardrails? I mean, can't then...
Well, they're informal guardrails, such as if something is done, and these are hypotheticals, and I hope we'll allow the Attorney General to take the office and to start exercising the authority that he has. So let's just calm it down a little bit and just wait and see. But here's the guardrail. If, and I don't think this is going to happen, if the Attorney General says, I don't want you to do X, then Bob Mueller says, here's my letter of resignation. And then the firestorm begins, right?
Wow, Ken, that's a pretty extreme idea that Robert Mueller would resign in protest. But just talk
no, it's
about
not. It's not extreme at all. If a law officer is doing what he or she thinks is required by the facts and is following the evidence where it leads, and has been authorized to do that by Rod Rosenstein, to interfere, to obstruct. I don't mean obstruction of justice. Jeff, you and I have talked about this before. I just mean to stop that kind of investigation. There's really going to be hell to pay. And you know that. Washington works that way. You try to exercise power in a way that's abusive, you're going to be found out. It's going to be really difficult to carry on, including within the department itself. You lose your moral authority as the Attorney General. You know that attorneys general have gone to jail, so you need to be very careful and circumspect when you're in that office and you've taken the oath. That you have to be very careful. You can't just be...
I guess the question that is, I think, troubling to a lot of people is, why was he appointed? And, you know, he has been on television here on CNN. He was a contributor here on CNN. We just played one clip. How critical he's been. This is, I mean, I know he was U.S. Attorney briefly in Des Moines quite a few years ago. He's run for office several times in Iowa as a Republican. He is, and the only thing we know about him as a public person in recent years is that he has been critical of the Mueller investigation. Is that really the qualification that an attorney general should have? With
all due respect, my friend Jeff, you're leaving out the critical fact, the most critical fact, that he's been serving as chief of staff to the Attorney General
For
of the
a few
United
months,
States.
just for a few months, Cam.
Well,
I mean, come on. Is that really?
I saw him in the summer, and when he was with the Attorney General, and I could tell that the Attorney General had great respect for him. He's a really respected guy. You've seen what, I'm going to repeat myself, what Chairman Grassley has said about him. This is a good Iowa Hawkeye who is a person, yes, does he have views? Yes, but you know what? Attorneys General do not always act on the basis of their views and opinions.
Yeah.
They act on the basis of the evidence and the law, and that's the test.
Yeah.
These are fair questions that you're raising. They're very important questions
I
that
have
you're
another
raising.
question, Mr. Starr, which
Yeah.
is that yesterday, President Trump said that he could fire everyone in the Mueller investigation if he chose to.
I agree with that. I think it would be a really dumb thing to do, but he has great power as the President of the United States, but he's subject to the rule of law. There are going to be these guardrails in place.
You seem to have more faith, frankly, in the norms than some of us who have seen norms being shattered for the past 2 years. I mean,
Really, this is hyperbole. Look, I've been in Washington for around 40 years, and I've seen a lot of attorneys general, and I tell you, these are overwhelmingly, and I have no reason to believe that Mr. Whitaker is not an honorable person who, now that he's taken the oath of office, is not going to do his best